Welcome to another episode of Cold-Blooded Serial. I am your host and true crime bestie, Tika. Today, we're getting into part 2 of the Shelly Knotek series. We will delve into the marriages of Michelle Watson, each relationship shrouded in darkness and tragedy. In the last episode, we started to discuss how Shelly often showed signs of being a manipulator, using both emotional and psychological tactics to get her way. I'm guessing that she would be called a sociopath. And of course, all of these negative traits become stronger as she gets older. So let's dive in. At the end of part 1, we started to discuss Shelly's first husband, Randy Rivardo. He was her high school sweetheart, and he drove over 2,500 miles from Murrysville, Pennsylvania to Battleground, Washington. In February 1973, Shelly and Randy, both 19 years old, tied the knot. And of course, he fell victim to her charm because Shelly shows people who she wants them to see before showing them her true colors. The day after they get married, she does not receive a phone call from an ex-wife like her stepmom did. But she's like, hey, Rand, we're living in this trailer that my parents gave us. And yeah, I'm married now. So this is not going to work. I need a house, like a nice, big, beautiful house with a wraparound porch, a white picket fence, all of that. Now that we're married, you need to make this happen. And Randy is like, what? He's like, Shelly, I make the same amount that I did yesterday. What makes you think that we can even afford a house? We're living at in your parents' trailer because I'm saving money to go to college because, that's the reason I came out here. You said I could come out here. Your dad would give me a job and give me free housing. So that way all of my money can go to my savings for college. Shelly's like, well, if you won't move me out of this trailer, I'm going to find another way to move. And she tries. So one day, Randy comes home from work. And when he walks into his trailer, his beautiful new bride's face is bloody. Her hair is disheveled. She just looks a mess. His home was in complete shambles. It looks like someone had a tornado in hand. It was just like, you know what? Let's just release this tornado in this little small area of their home. So, of course, he's like, oh my God, babe, what happened? She starts crying. She's like, I told you we needed to move out of this trailer. I was attacked. A random man walked in here. He beat me up. He raped me and he stole your rifle. So what do you think about that? We need to move. Randy is like, oh my gosh, like this is terrible. I'm so sorry. And he calls the sheriff and his father-in-law, Les. Both the sheriff and Les arrive within seconds of each other. The sheriff's like, hey guys, I need to go speak with Miss Shelly Rivardo alone. I will be back momentarily. A couple minutes goes by and he walks out. He's shaking his head and he's like, yeah, so she made up the whole thing. There was no attack. And Randy and Les are like, wait, but she's physically bruised. What do you mean there was no attack? Well, she just doesn't want to be in this trailer anymore. No one stole your gun. No one beat her up. No one raped her. Right there and then, Randy should have ran. Like, he should have sprinted away from this crazy woman. Because what do you mean? Like, you faked the whole thing. You beat yourself up. You destroyed your home. You guys, this is just the beginning, okay? It's only going to get worse from here. So the sheriff leaves. Randy is extremely patient. Shelly's just showing her true colors more and more. So months goes by. You know what, husband? I'm married now. I don't want to work. So you're going to have to just start putting in more overtime. Start working like 80 hours a week. You'll be fine. You're young. Okay. I'll just sit home and look glamorous. Randy's like, well, I'm struggling to make ends meet here, and we don't even have a kid. It'd be great if you continue working. All right, so her family owns a bunch of nursing homes. Her grandmother started this business. She owns a nursing home. Her dad owns a nursing home. And he also owns the bowling alley where he met her stepmom. And then a couple more siblings of his also own nursing homes. So Shelly is being passed around from nursing home to nursing home because no one really wants to fire her because she's related to them, but her work ethic sucks. Every time she gets fired from one nursing home, they send her back to her dad's. Finally, her dad is like, listen, you come here, but you're not even working. And sometimes you don't even show up at all. And she's like, well, Dad, you need to be a little more empathetic towards me, okay? I'm dealing with a lot right now. I have menstrual cramps that last a full 30 days. You're a man. You don't know what that's like. I do. So how about you show me some sympathy? Friends, listen, prior to her getting married, Shelly didn't have any of these 30-day menstrual cramps that no other woman has, okay? All of a sudden, once she became Mrs. Rivardo, she's like, yeah, you know what? I don't want to work. And he ends up letting her go. She comes home and she's like, well, Rand, that's it. My family has no sympathy for what I'm going through as a woman. I'm up here dealing with cramps that last a full 30 days and no one seems to care. So she's like, I'm going to be a stay-at-home wife now, but don't you expect me to cook and clean? No, no, no. I am just not going to work, okay? So once again, Randy should have ran. Now, we're going to fast forward a little bit. This is all still within the first year of them getting married. One day, while she's home, probably watching TV, I'm assuming she sees a commercial for a Volkswagen Beetle. And she's like, oh my gosh, I need that car. She goes to her dad and she's like, Dad, I need this car. I have to have it. I would look so good driving this car. Can you please, Daddy, please get me this vehicle? And he's like, all right, Shelly, I'll go find this vehicle for you. Thanks, Dad. Les goes out and he's searching high and low for a Volkswagen Beetle that is in his price range, okay? He doesn't find one. But what he does find is a Buick convertible. So he's like, hey, this is just as good. Plus, it's American made. You can't beat this. He drives the Buick convertible home and he is so proud of himself. He's so excited that his princess gets this brand new car. Well, when she sees it, she's like, what the hell is this, Dad? I didn't ask you for this crap. I asked you for a Volkswagen Beetle. I asked you for one thing and you can't even get that right. I want my Volkswagen Beetle. He leaves the car there and hours later, his son-in-law, Randy, is on the phone. He's freaking out. He's like, Les, get over here right now. Shelly's not waking up. So Les runs through his backyard to the trailer that they're living in, and Shelly is passed out on the floor with an empty bottle of vodka and some sleeping pills. So there's the bottle of sleeping pills and some are emptied next to her. Just like a scene that you would see in a movie, right? So the dad and Laura, the stepmom, tries to wake her up. She's not waking up. So they're like, oh my God, let's rush her to the hospital. They get to the ER and the doctor tries to wake her up. Shelly is not waking up. So they're all panicking like, oh my gosh, this is the end of the road, right? Well, the doctor brings her into the operating room, pumps her stomach, and moments later he comes out and he's like, Watson family, Mr. Rivardo, there was nothing in her stomach except for a couple aspirins. There was no alcohol. There was no sleeping pills. She is actually fine. She was just acting. Yeah, friends, she was just acting. She fooled a doctor into thinking that she was passed out drunk, but it was all an act. Someone give this woman an Oscar. She deserves an award for this performance. Let's fast forward to the summer of 1974. Mind you, she got married in February 1973, okay? Now it's the summer of 1974. Shelly announces to her family that she is pregnant. Randy is ecstatic. Laura, her stepmom, is like, oh God, I hope this baby gives her some humanity because Shelly needs help. And I hope this baby is the one to cure Shelly of her madness. Randy calls up his family and he's like, hey, mom, dad, guess what? You're going to be grandparents. They're excited. They're like, oh my God, we're coming out there. We're going to celebrate. He tells his wife, and she's like, they're coming out where? And he's like, they're coming out here. They're going to celebrate with us, take us shopping for baby things and, probably dinner and stuff like that, And she's like, no, I don't want to see them. You can tell them to stay right there. And he's like, no, that's my family. They're going to come out here because I want to see them and they want to see us. So his family arrives. And when they arrive, Shelly stays in her bedroom the whole time. They don't get a chance to see Shelly at all. So they just celebrate with their son. And it's just a great time. But like I mentioned in the last episode, nothing good lasts around Shelly. After Randy's family goes back to Pennsylvania, Randy is looking for all of the things that his family bought. So he's like, hey, babe, have you seen all of the gifts that my parents bought for the newborn baby? And Shelly's like, no, maybe they brought it back to Pennsylvania with them. So Randy just kind of brushes his wife off because he's like, you know what? Maybe it's hormones. So then shortly after that, he receives a phone call from his sister. And she's like, hey, Rand, I left my favorite sweater there. Can you ship it back to me? He's like, no problem. Shelly's like, you know what, Randy? I am like in a really good mood right now, feeling really helpful. I'll ship your sister's sweater off to her. And Randy, he's not thinking anything of it. He's like, maybe my wife's bipolar. Who knows? A few days later, his sister is like, hey, I just got the package and the package itself was completely intact, but my sweater had been cut into shreds. Do you know what happened? And he's like, no. He goes to Shelly and Shelly's like, no, why would I cut the sweater up? She was like, that doesn't even make sense. Maybe it was someone at the post office. And he's like, well, the package itself was completely intact. So this had to have been done before it got brought to the post office. Shelly is completely denying it because, she likes to gaslight people and she likes to be right at all times. And she will lie just to prove that she's right, even if she's wrong. So he knows that Shelly cut the sweater up, although she's denying it. The sister knows that Shelly cut the sweater up, although she's denying it. But Shelly is not going to confess. Let's fast forward to February 1975. This February day, the sun seemed to have shined a little brighter. Why? Because this is the day that Nikki Rivardo was born. But with this happy day also came more trouble in the Rivardo marriage. After their baby was born, Shelly began locking Randy out of his house at night. He began sleeping in his car just to avoid having any fights with Shelly. And the locking out of the house reminds me of Shelly's paternal grandmother, Grandma Anna. So Shelly's stepmom tells the author Greg Olson that Grandma Anna was a force to be reckoned with. Like when she walked down the street, people would run into their homes just to avoid her. That's how scary this woman was. The reason the locking out of the house reminds me of Grandma Anna is because Grandma Anna and her husband, George, were married for many years. And for at least 20 of those years, she locked him out of their house and made him sleep in the shed in their backyard. So Laura says that Grandpa George was the nicest man, really soft and caring, and the complete opposite of his psychotic wife. One day, Laura's like, hey, Grandma Anna, why don't you allow Grandpa George to sleep in the house? And Grandma Anna just looked at her and she was like, it's because it's what's best. Best for who? Because it's definitely not best for him. It's a shed, not even a trailer home, a shed. And, sheds back then weren't fancy like some of the sheds now. It wasn't a man cave. It was literally a tool shed. I think she said that it was no bigger than like 8 feet wide. So, it's not a very big shed at all. Anyways, after baby Nikki was born, Randy and Shelly, they're fighting more, they're arguing more. And Shelly wakes up one day and she's like, this little the allowance that you're giving me is not enough. Mind you, Shelly could still work if she wants to, right? But she's not going to. I have needs. I have bills that you don't know about. I have an appearance to keep up. So you need to start giving me more money. Better yet, I have a great idea. Just give me your whole paycheck. When you get paid, you just hand the check right over to me. And he's like, you must be out your freaking mind. I'm not giving you my paycheck. And she's like, okay. She doesn't say anything else. But what she does do is go to his employer. Do you remember who I told you his employer was? That's right, Mr. Les Watson, a.k.a. Shelly's dad. So she goes to her dad and she's like, Dad, I've asked you multiple times to give me Randy's check. I don't know what the problem is, but you and Randy are really getting on my nerves. And Les is like, you know what? I'm tired. I don't have the mental capacity to deal with your BS. When Randy gets paid on Friday, I'll make sure the check goes directly to you, Shelly. She's like, that's all I ask. You remember how I told you that Randy was really patient? This was his boiling point. He was like, wait, I work hard and I'm not getting my own check? No, I'm done. You know what? Newborn daughter, I love you so much, but your mom's psychotic, but I cannot do this anymore. Shelly, screw you. I'm out. And he calls up his family. He tells them that the marriage is over and that he needs to come back out to Pennsylvania. In an interview, Randy Rivardo said Shelly could be sweet when she wanted something, but it didn't take long for her true nature to show. She was domineering and cruel. So a few months after Randy leaves Shelly, Shelly drops off baby Nikki to one of her relatives in Battleground, Washington, and she disappears. So the relative ends up calling up Laura and asking if Laura knows where Shelly is. Laura has no idea, and she had no idea that Shelly just dropped the baby off and disappeared. So Laura drives from Vancouver to Battleground, which is about 25 minutes, and retrieves Nikki. Friends, she ends up raising Nikki for almost the first full year of Nikki's life before Shelly decides to come back. And when Shelly does come back, she goes to her parents' home like nothing's happened, like she's only been gone for a few hours. She gets Nikki and she leaves. No explanation as to where she has been for the past year. Isn't that insane? After Shelly takes Nikki, her parents are so worried that the next time Shelly leaves Nikki alone, she'll be leaving Nikki alone by herself. Like, they're constantly driving to Shelly's apartment, which is also in Vancouver, to ensure that Nikki is safe. One day, during one of their pop-up visits, Laura and Les are knocking on Shelly's apartment door. Shelly is not answering, so they assume that Shelly's not there. But one of her neighbors hears knocking and he comes out and he's like, hey guys, what's going on? And they're like, oh, we're Shelly's parents. Do you know where she is? And he's like, yeah, me and Shelly are friends. And we're so close that I even have a key to her apartment. Hold on, let me go let you in. And this young man, his name was Danny Long. Fast forward a few months, Shelly, Danny Long, and baby Nikki, who is now a toddler, moved to Battleground to live in the house that her grandma Anna had always promised would be her favorite grandchild. And of course, Shelly has a second baby on the way. But Shelly is not one to have a baby out of wedlock. She might have sex out of wedlock, but she's not having a baby out of wedlock. She's not going to be a single mom. So on June 2nd, 1978, Shelly and Danny Long get married. This is now Shelly's second marriage by the age of 24. And almost 2 months later, baby Samantha was born in August 1978. Nikki tells the author, Greg Olson, that Danny was a good dad, but didn't put up with Shelly's crazy behaviors, which she wasn't used to. So they would fight a lot. They would punch holes in the wall, throw dishes. It's pretty much like Shelly met her match. So in an interview, Danny Long says, at first, Shelly seemed like the perfect partner, but soon her abusive nature surfaced. She isolated me from my family and friends, making me feel worthless. And 5 years into their marriage, Danny divorced her. Just like husband number one, he hated leaving his daughters behind. Now, baby Samantha is 5 years old. Although Danny eventually escaped Shelly's grasp, he said that he was left with scars that would last a lifetime. All right, so friends, we already know that Shelly's not playing with a full deck, but let me tell you what happens after her and Danny divorce. She's like, you know what? I cannot be seen as a single mom. No freaking way. Not Shelly Watson. So she goes to her daughters and she's like, hey, girls, going forward, any guy that I bring home that I'm dating, you must call him dad. And her oldest daughter, Nikki, is like, what? And she's like, yeah, you heard me. You're not to call my boyfriends by their first name. You have to call them dad. And then she would proceed to go to their school, ask to see the paperwork, and would illegally change their last name to whatever the boyfriend's last name was. Listen, it's confusing. I get it. So let me give you an example. Say she's dating a man named Henry Jordan. She's like, daughters, call him dad. Okay? Forget about your other dad. He left us. Then she would go to the school and be like, hey, I know here it says that Nikki's last name is Rivardo. Well, that's no more. She would cross out the last name Rivardo and she'd be like, hey, right now her name is Nikki Jordan because I'm dating Mr. Henry Jordan. Samantha, her name is Samantha Jordan. Her and Henry Jordan break up a couple months later. She starts dating Ben Smith. And she's like, you know what? Nikki's last name is no longer Jordan. It's now Smith. Nikki Smith, Samantha Smith. Ben Smith and Shelly break up a couple months later. And she would continue this process all the way up until she met her third husband, David Knotek. Friends, what in the world? Like, I don't know if the secretary was like, hey, this woman is crazy or what, but they just went along with it and just allowed her to change the children's last name on their report cards. It's weird. All right. So on to the third husband. One night in August of 1982, a young man drives down to Long Beach, Washington in search of a beer and a little distraction. His Volkswagen Beetle leads him to the Sore Thumb, a bar packed with young men just shooting the breeze, playing darts, shooting pool, drinking beers, just doing manly stuff that they did in the early 80s. And there, in the sea of men, stood the most beautiful red-headed bombshell that he has ever laid eyes on. They talk, they exchange numbers, and before he knows it, he is driving down to Vancouver every week to see her and her two daughters. Shelly's third and most infamous marriage would be to this young man, David Knotek. Together, they created a house of horrors that would shock their community and the nation. Nikki, Shelly's oldest daughter, shares a memory that comes to her on occasion. She says right before they moved to Raymond, Washington to live with Dave Knotek, that she was asleep in her bed when all of a sudden she wakes up unable to breathe through a pillow that's pressed on her face. Could you imagine what she's going through right now, trying to get this pillow off? Her legs and arms are probably flailing. You know, she's trying to breathe. She's still just a kid. And she starts screaming for her mother. And suddenly, like as in a very instant, her mother, Shelly, is right there. Like, friends, I don't mean like, oh, her mother suddenly burst through the bedroom door. I mean, her mom was right beside her bed when the pillow was removed and Nikki's eyes opened. I don't even know how that poor child must have felt to be betrayed by the person who's supposed to love you the most. As a kid, you don't want to believe that either one of your parents are going to harm you. But your mom, the one who gave birth to you, is supposed to be your number one protector in the world. But yet, in this very moment, you realize that your mom has tried to kill you. I can't imagine, like, my mom and I are best friends. So to hear about this, it's heartbreaking because it's like, what would push you as a mother who gave life to this person? What would push you to try to take their life away? I'm sorry, you guys, I'm getting emotional. I'm going to move on. So when Nikki finally sees her mom standing there, Shelly's like, oh, baby girl, what happened? What's wrong? Nikki's crying and she's like, someone just had a pillow over my face. Shelly's like, no, it was a bad dream. You guys, once again, gaslighting her daughter. Like, ooh, I want to cuss at her. Like, this woman is the queen of gaslighting. Oh my God. She refuses to take accountability for any of her actions. So she's like, no, it was just a bad dream. And Nikki is like, no, mom, it wasn't a dream. It was real. And Shelly is like, no, Nikki, trust me. It was just a bad dream. And right there and then, Nikki knew not to go back and forth with her mom because her mom is never wrong. And her mom would not back down. And her mom would not tell her that her daughter is right. For years, this moment has stayed with Nikki, especially as she thinks about the speed with which her mother responded. Later in life, she would wonder if that was the first time her mother had messed with her mentally and tried to kill her. Shelly needs to be buried under the prison. So, as the new couple, Dave and Shelly, grows closer, Shelly, being the compulsive liar that she is and the hungry attention seeker that she is, goes to her new boyfriend and she's like, Dave, the world is just unfair. And I just want to know that I have cancer and I don't even think I'm going to make it to 30. She's 29 right now, okay? So, Dave is in shock. Like, what? Shelly, you look so healthy. Your skin is flawless, it's radiant, your hair is like so full and vibrant. What do you mean you have cancer and you might not make it to 30? She's like, well, Dave, in this unfair world, I got a cancer that's eating me up inside, but it's not messing with my looks, I'm blessed that way. My looks are going to stay great until I die, probably within the year. So Dave is like, oh my God, you need someone to help raise your kids. I'm here for you now. I'll be here for them. Let's get married. Shelly's like, yeah, let's get married. And on December 28th, 1987, Shelly and Dave tie the knot. And this is when she becomes the infamous Shelly Knotek. And just like her previous husbands, right after they get married, he begins to see the monster that he married. Nikki tells Greg Olson, the author, how compliant, passive, and submissive Dave was, despite how much words of hatred and disgust that her mom spewed towards him. He would never raise his voice towards her. He would never hit her. And Dave actually tells the author, she'd get violent, really violent. She'd slap me around a few times and I didn't hit her back because that's not what a man does. She'd push, shove, scream, just really violent. And I wasn't used to that. But after her violent episode, she would snuggle up to him and sing, this is normal, Dave. This is the way people work things out. If you're in an unhealthy relationship, most people don't want to work things out violently. So for her to gaslight him into thinking that this is normal, I mean, I'm just giving you more and more proof of what a psycho she is. She is definitely an evil person. So Dave was like, you know what, Shelly, I'm not going to give up on you. And he would go spend the night at his parents' house just to get a break from her. But him not staying there further sparked her rage. She's like, you're supposed to be a man. You're supposed to take my shit and just suck it up. Don't run off to mommy and daddy to help you out every time. And then he'd come back home and she would be like super angelic, snuggling up to him for a few hours, sometimes a few days before she would revert right back to her evil ways. He said that a lot of people would ask why he doesn't just leave. And friends, further on in this documentary, I will tell you about a day that you won't feel compassion for. But right now, I'm going to show you how broken this man is, okay? So people would ask, why don't you just leave her, man? Like, why are you staying? And he said, you just didn't do that to Shelly. You can't. She wouldn't allow it. She would hunt you down. And I'm thinking that for him to feel like this early on, whereas the other two were able to get out within 5 years, I'm thinking that night that they met at the bar, she must have been like, you know what? He reminds me of my grandpa. He doesn't seem like he has much of a backbone. This is the one that I can manipulate to do anything that I want him to do. And later on, friends, we will see just how much he does because she says so. All right. So after all of the abuse that Dave took from Shelly, he still wanted to make her happy. And he ended up renting her dream home, which was a big craftsman home in Old Willapa. Everybody said that it was charming and comfortable on the outside. It was almost a perfect looking home on the outside. But as I mentioned in the last episode and earlier in this episode, nothing good lasts around Shelly. And this beautiful house becomes the place where everything bad happened. Like you thought she was bad before. Oh, friends, just wait. And this is where I leave you. Thank you so much for listening. And please stay tuned for the next episode where we dive into how truly evil Shelly Knotek becomes, leading to the deaths of her nephew, her best friend, and confidant. Stay safe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.